It's over, Vegas fans. They've lost. It's over. It's done. Hey, hockey fans. Welcome to the Idiots Talk Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Keegan, and I'm joined by Eric. And today we are recapping Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Finals, in which the Washington Capitals defeat the Vegas Golden Knights 6-2. And the score made it look a little worse than it was. Vegas looked not quite as horrible as that might indicate, but it is not bright if you're a Vegas fan. That's for sure.
Yeah, the thing is, Washington is just looking so dominant in every facet of the game. They're doing what they need to do out there. They're doing it at will, making plays at will. Vegas can't get nothing strung together. Looking decent, pretty good even in short spurts. But other than that, yeah, it's tough if you're a Vegas fan right now. But don't give up hope.
A lot of posts. There were 3 posts at least, I think, for Vegas. In the first 5 minutes, James Neal has perhaps one of the worst blunders that we've seen in the Stanley Cup Finals so far. I mean, Alex Tuck was kind of the guy in the dressing room that everybody was rolling their eyes at. Maybe it's James Neal now, even though he scores a little bit later on in the game. But it's kind of reminiscent to the Patrick Stefan in 2007 missing the empty net goal. I mean, he literally had the entire net to shoot at. And it's not like he hit near side post, which I could maybe side with him on. It was far side post. He went across the net and hit the other side post.
Hard to believe James Neal doesn't put the puck in the net there. I myself thought it was going to be in, and yeah, for him to hit that far side post, it was pretty crazy.
Embarrassing.
Embarrassing. If you're James Neal, he wants that one back, which he did get a goal in last night's game, but again, boy, it would have been nice to have 2 for him.
Carlson looked a lot better. We were kind of calling him out last podcast. A couple of 2 couch potatoes
His best
here.
game so far in this series. Even though he did score in Game 1, I think he even looked better last night, which is a good sign if you're a Vegas fan.
Definitely. And, someone who we were chatting up last podcast, Marc-Andre Fleury, looked quite pedestrian last night with a .650 save percentage. I've been hearing a lot of people analyzing Marc-Andre Fleury and saying, oh, well, he had this .940 coming in and all this stuff. But if you look at it now, he's got, I think, like a .750 in the finals, and that's horrible. It's not good enough, and you're not going to win with that.
Well, and some of those goals last night are ones that you expect Fleury to stop. Some of they were innocent-looking shots, and they snuck through. And with as many big saves as he's made so far this series, I mean, you still have to have faith in him. He's still a great goaltender, but yeah, he definitely could have played a better game last night.
I think that the Washington Capitals have got to him, unfortunately. That's kind of the way it seems so far, but you never know. There's still a lot of hockey left. There's potentially 3 more games. I don't know how you can envision Vegas coming back and winning this one. I think the Capitals have scored when they've needed to every game, and again, it just reminds me so much of our recent Stanley Cup champions the last 2 years, the Pittsburgh Penguins. They scored when they needed to. They didn't outplay the team that they were playing for the full 60. They just capitalized on the opportunities when they had them.
Until Vegas can strip Washington of the momentum, Vegas is not going to win a game. We need to see that momentum shift, and Vegas has to get rolling here, or else Washington's going to be closing this one out here in the next 3 games.
There's always the thought, if James Neal scores the first goal, if that first one, I think in the first minute they had a post, a centering attempt, if those 2 go in and it's 2-0 Vegas in the first 5, of course it's a different game. It's easy to see that. It's easy to make that connection, but it wasn't. And that's what it comes down to. I think Nashville Predators fans could tell you if this play and if that play, and the same thing with San Jose fans, but it just, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. There's no asterisk on the cup that says, if they would have lost this game or put this puck in, then it's different. And the Capitals are just looking much hungrier. They're celebrating harder. This is something we talked about before the podcast. When Riley Smith scores that second goal, you'd like to see that emotion out of him.
Yeah, you sure do. Going back just a little bit here, though, before the James Neal opportunity in which he hit the post, Vegas looked really good. They jumped out. They were quick. They were looking better than Washington the first 6-7 minutes, and I think – and that was after he hit the post. They still, it's not good, when a big goal scorer of yours can't put it in on an empty net. But even with that being said, they still looked good for a few minutes after that, and then they just fell flat again.
It's true, and I just think that this Capitals team is being very opportunistic right now. They're for lack of a better description, capitalizing on all their open opportunities, and that's what you need out of a Stanley Cup champion, as we mentioned. And special teams were a huge story in this one. Capitals going 3 for 5 on the power play, and Vegas going technically 0 for 4. Neal scores that goal as the penalty expires. I'm going to give it to him 1 for 4, but 25% is not good enough when you were taking a bunch of penalties like they did. I mean, they took 5 penalties last night against a Capitals team that's going to bury those power play opportunities more often than not. And how good was TJ Oshie last night? We didn't even talk about him before the podcast.
Another huge game for TJ Oshie, doing everything, scoring the first goal. I think he might have had an assist or two thrown in there too. Just doing everything right. 3.9 for him. You just can't ask for anything more out of TJ Oshie. He's going above and beyond his role, and it's a great thing to see.
He's playing that physical game too. He's laying the body. He's hitting guys, and that reverse hit on Colin Miller that came in the third period, the dagger goal, the 5th goal there. You know, guys calling for a penalty on that one. What do you expect the guy to do? Get ran over? You know, that's maybe one of the worst things I've heard so far is people are calling for a penalty or calling for TJ Oshie's head on that one. What do you expect him to do? Get ran by Colin Miller?
Right.
He knows he's coming.
Right.
So he's going to try to close the door on him a little bit. Peter Forsberg made that move very popular in the early 2000s, and I just think that's TJ Oshie playing hard, and that is something I will say. The refs let them play. They let them play last night for the most part. There were a couple penalties, but again, we should touch on this. There were no egregious embellishment calls by the Vegas Golden Knights. I think that the refs talked to them or spoke to the coach and said, hey, listen, we got something from upstairs. We're not going to be calling those same calls that we called the night before, because the night before there may have been 3 to 5 penalties that were just a little soft, and you want to see as little soft calls in the playoffs as possible, especially at this stage. And I don't think it was working for him last night.
Well, and if you're Vegas, you can't let a team go 3 for 5 against your penalty kill. That just can't happen. You've got to switch things up.
Have to do better.
You have to do better there. But hats off to Washington. They had a great power play all night. I believe it was the last power play goal they scored. It was the 4th goal. John Carlson slap shot actually switched places on the power play with Ovechkin. Pretty cool to see.
Beautiful adjustment there. And it's one that I don't, it almost seemed, I'm sure these guys are prepared for every situation. I'm sure of it. But it seemed like they had no idea what was going on when it happened. I mean, it really seemed like they had never even thought that was a possibility, because almost immediately the switch happens, and 10 seconds later, that puck's on John Carlson's stick and immediately past Fleury. And for some reason, I feel like Fleury didn't know what was going on there, because Fleury expects Ovechkin to be over there. Maybe Fleury notices and says, oh, it's Carlson, he's going to go for the pass. Who knows? Who knows what happens there? But does the Cup mean more to the Capitals this year? I mean, it certainly seemed like it. These last 3 games, the Capitals are much hungrier and just burying the chances that they need to bury. And that's not saying that Vegas has looked horrible. This is not a show we're not bashing on the Vegas Golden Knights. They've looked okay, but it doesn't look like they've suffered. And obviously they haven't. The disappointment that the Capitals have suffered in recent years, and that disappointment is coming to really aid the Capitals at this stage of the game.
And if anything, if Washington does end up cleaning Vegas out here and winning the Cup, it's going to make Vegas that much hungrier next season. Get back to that point, to get back in the playoffs. They're a hungry young team, nothing to worry about. I think a Cup would be great to see for either one of these teams, and but just the thing, Washington is just looking so dominant at this point. It's hard to believe that they're not going to end up being the ones that raise the Cup.
Washington's whole team is not coming back. We know that. I mean, this is like every year with the Washington Capitals. They're going to lose 2 or 3 character guys that are really important to them simply because money. I mean, these guys come in. They have it's like Carl Alsner. I remember last year losing Carl Alsner. Anybody who was a fan of the Washington Capitals said, oh, this is the end of the Capitals. Alsner's an Iron Man, doesn't miss games, always shows up to play. But you've got these people stepping up for Washington, having these big years. Michael Kempny, who is he's going to be a free agent at the end of the season. What is he worth to the Capitals? I can tell you more than they can afford. And that's kind of the thing. I think that the Capitals realize the gravity of the situation more than the Vegas Golden Knights. And that's probably a tough call to make because these guys are all professionals. They all know that they might not be back here again, but it just seems as though Washington has a little more fight in them down the stretch here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you have more leaders over there in Washington. You have more veterans. You have guys that just seem to be a little bit hungrier for the cup. Like you had said, I think they realize that the time is now. If they don't get a cup this year, are we going to see them back, next year this deep in the playoffs? Well, it's hard to say because, as you mentioned, they are going to be switching their team around quite a bit. It's hard to believe that they're not. So,
and in the short term, Game 5 is a huge game. Obviously, I think you'd be remiss to say that Vegas is going to win, and you'd be it'd be silly for you to say that Washington's going to win. We don't know what's going to happen here, and if Game 5 is taken by the Vegas Golden Knights, and if it goes back to Washington, how important is that Game 6 on Washington soil? I mean, that's got to be the one, because Game 7 in Vegas, if they've won 2 in a row, we've got a totally different outlook here.
Game 7 in Vegas is scary if you're Washington. So what Washington's looking to do is close them out in Game 5.
We know what it looks like. We know is that Washington can win in Vegas. They stole Game 2 a little bit, and it does not look as though Vegas can win in Washington. But at this stage of the game, you just have no idea what's going to happen. That's why we watch it. That's why we tune in, because these are just the beautiful moments that, kind of everything unfolds in front of you. And for the first 5 minutes of that game, it looks terrible for Washington. They score 1, they score 2, and then they get that third with 20 seconds left in the first period that, aside from the 2 goals that Vegas were to later score, it really looked as though Vegas was flat for quite some time after that. And I just think that the Capitals can and should close this out in Vegas, away from the home crowd, which is kind of unfortunate. You kind of want to see anybody on the Capitals raise that cup in home. But I think the last 2 years it has been an away Stanley Cup raising. So the Capitals have won all the games they've needed to win this year. So I don't know who's not excited for this one coming up.
Well, in Game 5, it's hard to believe that Washington is not going to just keep bringing the pressure, keep bringing the game to Vegas. So if you're Vegas, what you need to do is you need to equal that, or even better, bring more energy than the Capitals do. Because I don't think the Capitals are going to stop. They're going to keep this momentum going. They're going to play very hard in Game 5 because they want to close it out there. They don't want to go – I don't think they'd mind going back home. They'd rather not, but they sure as heck don't want to go to a Game 7 in Vegas. So I think, Vegas needs to dig deep, figure out what they need to do to get them legs moving, keep up. And we've seen Vegas look great in short bursts, and that's something, they just haven't been able to string a full period together. And you need to start there. You need to have a great first, followed by a great second. I know it sounds self-explanatory here, and then a great third. So.
Well, it's all cliche at this point. It's not like we're saying anything that a hockey fan or someone who really follows the sport, or even a player, doesn't already know. You have to dig deep at this stage of the game. You have to play better than you played last game, than you played last shift. And it's a one-period mentality. And it's the first goal. I can't explain to you how anybody knows how important that is. Vegas comes out and gets the first goal, I think, twice in the series, maybe Game 2 and Game 3, and Washington still comes back. So Vegas needs to get some momentum early in Game 5.
And keep
1,
it.
2 quick goals and keep moving.
The momentum, not for 5 minutes, not for 10, for 60.
Don't take penalties. Play smart hockey. I honestly keep Ryan Reeves on the bench. It doesn't look like Ryan Reeves is as big of a factor as maybe we thought he was going to be in Game 1. Because in Game 1, he scores a goal. He looks great, but that kind of his style of play, it looked almost distasteful at the end of the game last night. I think as everything was starting to wind down before the Capitals added their 6th there, they start the power play 1 against a 5-on-3, and I think Vegas had a little something to say about that. Maybe rightfully so, but at the same time, it just looked as though Vegas was way more frustrated than we have seen them in any other game so far. You mentioned this after the second game, that Vegas looked frustrated, and it's only gotten worse for them as the games have gone on, and it's going to be, quite honestly, a surprise if they're not frustrated in the next game.
Let's hope the end of Game 4. Let's hope they got out their frustration. They need to do something to get it out. So
hopefully.
Let's hope it's out of their system. Let's hope they can bring a better game to Game 5, because that's what they need. They can't keep playing this way. They can't keep playing mad, frustrated, mad at the refs. I'm sure they're probably even a little bit angry with each other at this point. I think there was a James Neal interview after Game 3, I believe, where he was, not happy with himself and his line, saying his line wasn't playing the way they needed to. And I think everyone on that Vegas team needs to take a look at that. Nobody's playing great, and they all need to play great in Game 5, or else it's going to be more of the same. So I'll let you take it from here, Keegan.
Moving forward, it's a lot more of doing the simple things well. We talked about this in the last podcast. It's the simple plays. When you watch a guy like TJ Oshie, you see how simple he plays. I mean, he puts his body on people. He grabs the puck. He gets it to a teammate. He doesn't do anything flashy, And we have to touch on. We didn't talk about him at all. Evgeny Kuznetsov looked like the best player in the NHL last night. I mean, this guy, the last 2 games, I think he popped out his shoulder. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but that's probably the only injury that could have looked like that someone can have come back from, unless they're tossing in some Russian vitamins there. Who knows? But it looked as though Kuznetsov is the best player on the ice, and that's almost every shift. You see that play to Tom Wilson, that little give and go. I mean, every time the guy has the puck, something special is about to happen. And you see this Washington Capitals team, you've got so many guys rising to the surface. Smith Pelly with a huge goal. Kuznetsov playing out of his mind. Tom Wilson adding a goal. Ovechkin didn't score last night. They had 6 goals, and Ovechkin didn't have 1. This looks a lot like Vegas looked in the regular season, but we haven't seen it in the finals yet.
Well, and it's great to get the support that Washington is getting from nearly all their lines. Line 4 has been a surprise.
Big time.
Great for them, as is, lines 1 and 2. Line 3, probably their slowest going line so far for Washington.
At least in last game, that's for sure.
They had a big Game 7 in Tampa. I believe Burakovsky buried 2 goals. And
2 goals.
It was a huge line for them. But in this Vegas series, that's probably the slowest line we've seen from Washington. But they're still playing good. But again, I keep going back to Vegas here, but they need to do what they can to match line for line what Washington is throwing at them. It can't be stressed enough.
That's right. It's a very tough time to be a Vegas Golden Knights fan and especially a hockey player, And I just it's hard to see. It's hard to see a possibility in which they come out and win 3 of these straight with the Capitals playing the way they've played in all 4 games. The first game was not a horrible game played by the Capitals. Holtby could have picked up a few more saves. The defense maybe could have picked up a couple more reads. That no-set goal comes to mind, the go-ahead goal there in the third period. And we have to remember, Fleury has let in a lot of goals this series. He's looking okay. Last night he did not look okay. Last night he looks as though his smile was gone. He wasn't having fun out there. And who knows? I mean, 2 days in between is a lot of time. And Vegas needs every single minute. They need every single minute of rest here. They need to really look inwardly, see what's going on. And I don't know if Tomas Tatar comes back in the lineup. Gerard Gallant made some lineup changes, and did that even really help them last night? I mean, they certainly looked energized for points of the game, but they have looked energized for points in all of the games. They just haven't been able to put together a full 20. I haven't seen a full period absolutely dominated by the Golden Knights yet.
And in order to do that, I think they need to grab the momentum. They need better goaltending than they had in Game 4.
Which is unfortunate to say because Fleury is still Marc-Andre Fleury doing his best, but it's not good enough yet.
And this is really the only game that you might be able to blame a little bit on Marc-Andre Fleury. All the other games, he's looked great, making huge saves. But Vegas has to grab the momentum. They need great goaltending. And I think they need to find a way to just, like you said, string together those 20 minutes at a time and, for a full 60.
Now let's have some fun here. Over-under on 45 minutes of Vegas Golden Knights pregame bonanza here going on. I think they ought to cut this one pretty short and get to business. I doubt it. I think it's going to be
– keep the fire going. Keep the fire lit over there in Vegas. Get them excited. The fans need to do what they can do to, get behind this team, show that support. I hope they go balls to the wall here. They need to.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be fortunately, a lot of these Golden Knights fans, maybe there's a lot that are new to the game, and there are a lot who haven't suffered like a Blues fan has, or a Capitals fan has, or, I mean, name another franchise without a cup. Nashville, for crying out loud. San Jose. I mean, these fan bases have been through it all, and years of this. You know, St. Louis Blues, has it been over 50 years? I think
Over
it's
50.
I think it's over 50 years without a cup, and you know it's kind of depressing to think that if Vegas doesn't close this one out, doesn't come back, doesn't win, maybe like a real franchise, they go, because the Blues made it for the first 3 years in a row. Yes, it was in a watered down conference, we get it, but they made it for the first 3 years and they still haven't made it back since then. So it is not. I mean, it's
Something that looms large over the city. It's haunting.
It's got to be, you know. And I just think that Vegas needs to do something different in Game 5. And I mean, obviously they've lost 3 in a row here. They look like they're on their heels. And the Capitals are celebrating harder. They look happier. They look like they're more emotionally attached to this. It doesn't. I'm not going to say that Vegas Golden Knights quit or that they had quit in them. But it didn't look like a team who needed to win last night. And that's all I have to say about it, really. So, Eric, if you have nothing else to add, I want to thank Jordan Schultz for listening to this, because he's probably our only listener. And with that said, Schultz, have a great day, buddy.